Since taking over as owners of Chelsea, Todd Boehly and BlueCo have spent a ton of money on incoming transfers, and as everyone in the football world knows, Chelsea have signed a lot of players, some that have done well, some not so much, and even though there's loads of them, today I'm going to attempt to rank all of them in a tier list. And as you can see, I've got a ton of players to get through, from people signed literally today, Pedro Neto, to Raheem Sterling, who was of course one of the first few signings of the BlueCo era. Some of them were meant to influence the first team, some of them were signed purely for profit, and this isn't even all of them. I'm not even including the guys here that were signed for the under-23s, the under-18s, like Dujon Richards, Alex Matos. We'll talk about them in a different video maybe, but for now, we've already got plenty of first team transfers to get through, some of which, if you're not a diehard Chelsea fan, you might hear the names of them and not even know who they are. There's that many players that Chelsea have signed. Now, I've got to put them into 5 tiers today. Either the flop tier for those transfers that didn't work out, still time for those players that it's too early to make a verdict on just yet, profit makers, the ones that aren't really going to influence Chelsea's first team squad, but will likely make the club some profit and therefore probably were a good signing. We've got good signings for those guys that did quite well since coming to Chelsea, and top transfers for those guys that have came in and done a really good job. Like, of course, Cole Palmer's going to be up there, spoiler alert, for a little bit later on. But of course, you guys might have different opinions to me, so I want to hear them in the comments down below. I've done plenty of these tier list videos on the Football Manager content that I do on my other channels, and it tends to be, they're quite diversive. Everyone's got their own opinion, so let me know down below your thoughts on any of these players that you want to. Make sure you like the video if you do go on to enjoy it, or just to give me a boost. And as well, if you haven't yet subscribed to the Jake Talks Chelsea channel, make sure you do so as we push for 1,000 subscribers. With that being said, let's kick off this list, shall we? We've got so many players to get through that realistically, I'm not going to spend too long talking about each one, but the 2 that I'm going to rule out straight away, actually 3, are the guys that haven't even played a minute of football for Chelsea yet, 2 of which aren't even official but look to be, so I'm just going to cover them quickly. Sammy Memorial Dion, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but the Spanish striker from Atletico for about 30 million will be in the still time section, of course, and Mike Penders, the young goalkeeper, signed for about 20 mil, I think it was, from the Belgian divisions, also still time. I can't judge them yet, they're not even Chelsea players. Pedro Neto, though, as much as I want to put him in top transfer already, because I do really like the look of him, again, has to go in the still time section. So now that's eliminated all the people that are yet to actually kick a ball for Chelsea since signing, and we can get in to all of these players we've got here, and there are plenty. And I think the best place to start is going to be Raheem Sterling. Now, Sterling's an interesting one because when he came from City, he was a multiple-time title winner, was coming in as the guy that was going to bring experience and help drag Chelsea to that title. Since then, we know that's not really gone to plan, but he's on mega wages, it was a big fee, and he just hasn't quite hit the heights yet. Now, there's been times where I've really liked Sterling, sometimes where I feel like I don't because he seems to lack effort on some occasions. So obviously, there's the stuff from last season where he could have played it across goal a few times, but seemed to be a bit more selfish, which you need to be a top player. So that's a harsh thing to point at him, I suppose. But I think right now, he's going to have to go in the flop section, which is a bit harsh to start with. And I'm sure Chelsea are going to have a few in this flop section. But me as a Chelsea fan, I just haven't seen enough from Sterling so far. That being said, I actually do think he's going to have a good year under Maresca as a touchline hugging winger, cutting in and pulling balls back from the byline. That tends to be something he was good at back in his Man City days. So fingers crossed we can see Sterling at least live up to some of the price tag that we paid for him. But for now, he's got to be in the flop section. And the man that goes alongside him, I think it's just a guarantee. Kalidou Koulibaly came in as a player that we've been after for so many years, joined Chelsea from Napoli, and it just did not work out. Shipped off to Saudi not too long after. Some big mistakes in him as well. Did score a goal, I think, on his debut, didn't he, against Spurs, or at least very early on in his Chelsea career. But Kalidou Koulibaly, for me, is a flop. This one's interesting, though. Marc Cucurella, a player that not too long ago, I think pretty much every Chelsea fan and every non-Chelsea fan would have said flop. But last season, particularly towards the back half of it under Pochettino, he was much improved, looked like one of the better players in our team, and also has done a pretty good job for Spain. I say a pretty good job, a very good job in the Euros, and comes back as a man in form, a man that everyone's now just expecting to start for Chelsea. And for that reason, I actually don't think this is a flop, at least not just yet. If he has another bad year, maybe so. It was a big price tag, but I'm going to say still time, which is crazy to say for a player that's been at the club for a few seasons. But I think only now we're going to start seeing the real Marc Cucurella. The fans are going to get behind him. He's going to have much more confidence, and maybe this Maresca style will suit him. So for me, I'm actually going to say still time on Cucurella, which might seem a bit harsh now for Sterling to be in the flop, but I've seen a bit more from Cucurella, particularly in the second half of last year, to say, you know what, let's say still time for now, and then judge him at the end of this season. Up next, though, is Carney Chukwuemeka, who he signed from Aston Villa. I didn't know too much about him. I know he was highly thought of there, but he's came to Chelsea, and every time I've seen him, I thought he seems like a good player. Now, do I think he's someone that's going to impact the first team long term? I'm not necessarily sure. I think there might be a few players ahead of him now in the pecking order, and there's some rumours he's even being linked to Barcelona. But I think if Chelsea were to sell him, they'd at least break even or make a profit on him. I don't quite think he's in the good signing section just yet, but you know what? I think Chukwuemeka hasn't been a bad signing at all so far for Chelsea. But saying that, that's one in what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 transfers we've done so far, and this is the first one that makes it into at least the okay tier of players. Next one, though, is going to be another decent one. Amari Hutchinson, a player that we signed from Arsenal and then sold on to Ipswich for a decent profit. So for that reason, a profit maker. That transfer seemed to work. We then have the American goalkeeper Slanina, who Chelsea spent a pretty decent fee on, but at the time seemed like a nice move. A young goalie who was playing football, who could eventually become our number one. Since then, though, Chelsea have signed 4 goalkeepers that are just on this list, from Penders to Petrovic and Sanchez, who we'll get to earlier, and even Philip Jorgensen, who was only recently signed. And for that reason, Slanina looks like he just fell down the pecking order, is now having a loan out in the 3rd tier of English football with Barnsley, which might be good for him. He might still be a player that comes good, but I think for the money spent on him, he's going to have to go in the flop section. He's had a couple of seasons now of developing. Doesn't really look like he's going to be that man for Chelsea just yet. Maybe he is someone that down the line will get better. Goalkeepers do tend to peak in later years. But as of right now, I think for me, Slanina is in the flop section. Our next one is Cesare Casadei, the Italian, who was doing really well for the Italian youth teams. Chelsea picked him up, but I think they have mismanaged him since signing him, sending him to Leicester. And just as he was starting to really get some game time, they pulled him away in January. And I spoke to many Leicester fans. I'm from Leicester, and many of them think in that second half of the season, because of injuries and whatnot, Casadei would have played a lot more football. Instead, he came back to us, didn't play much at all, always seemed okay when he came on, but I just don't think it's really going to work out for him. That being said, I don't necessarily think he's a flop. Do I think he's going to make us profit? I'm not too sure just yet. There are rumours Chelsea are willing to sell permanently or loan, so I think we'll say still a bit of time on Casadei. After this season, we can probably make our mind up if he was a worthwhile transfer, but I think for now, for me, he is in the still time section. The next one is an interesting one though. Wes Fofana, another player that was at Leicester at some point. Chelsea spent big money on, and I think many people will expect me to put him in the flop section, but I just think it's pretty harsh to say that about a man that's probably only played, you know, in the time he's been at Chelsea, 10% of the time he's been fit. He's been out of injury all the other time, and if he spends another season on the injury table, then I think we will have to say it was a flop of a signing. But I think for now, still time under Maresca. I think he will be one of the first choice centre-backs, so if he can stay fit this season, play some football, I think from what we've seen from Fofana, there is a good player there, and we know what he could have been before his injuries, so fingers crossed he can get back to that stage. So for me, another one in the still time section, which is already filling up with a good few players, but don't worry, we've got some now that can be decided straight away. Dennis Zakaria, a weird transfer, didn't really work for us, played a few games and looked okay, came in on loan, didn't really impact us all that much, so I'm going to say flop. And Aubameyang is about as flop as it gets. I think most people when we signed him knew this would be the case. It just did not work out at Chelsea. Wasn't a player we should have ever tried to sign. We'd have been better off giving minutes to other players. He never really looked like he was interested either, so for that reason, Aubameyang is in the flop section. David Atro Fofana, another one that Chelsea, like Casadei, might be willing to sell this summer by the looks of it, almost definitely will. He's done okay at his loan in Burnley. Here at Chelsea, when he has played and been given an opportunity, I always thought he looked full of tenacity, looked decent, but of course, that's not enough to be a first-team Chelsea striker, so it looks like he's going to go elsewhere now and be sold, and I think Chelsea will at least break even or make a profit on him. They didn't spend a crazy amount on him really when he first came in, so I do think there is potential there that we will make just a little bit more profit on what we signed him for. So for now, he can go in that section. Benoit Badiashile, someone that when he came into Chelsea looked great, but then last season didn't as much, so I think this is a real make or break season for him. Still time under Maresca. It'll be him and Colwill vying for that left centre-back spot. We'll see who comes out on top by the end of the season. Andre Santos, another one, been loaned to Strasbourg now for not just the back end of last year, but this season too. Still time on him. Very highly thought of in Brazil. Goes to Strasbourg now with the intention supposedly of bringing him back into the Chelsea first team after the loan. So we'll see how he gets on in France, and then at the end of the season, we can judge it if he's ever really going to impact the Chelsea first team squad. But so far, it's not looking very good for Todd Boehly and co. The players that he signed haven't quite worked out just yet. There are some better ones coming up. João Felix, this is one that it's just so harsh to say. He has to be in flop, but it's not even his fault, because when he did play for Chelsea, I mean, he did get that stupid red card very early on in his Chelsea career, but he always looked okay. But the fee Chelsea paid for him as a half a season loan, the man would have had to have scored hat-tricks every game to have made that transfer worthwhile. So for that reason, unfortunately, he is straight in to that flop section. Mudryk is up next. This is a player that I think, if I'm holding him to the same light that I'm holding Raheem Sterling in, I have to say flop again. I actually think Mudryk is so talented, and I remember when he came on against Liverpool on his debut, and it was like Eden Hazard had been reborn. I thought we'd made a really good signing, but since then, despite some glimpses of quality, it's just not been consistent enough from Mudryk, and just because of the price tag, I think he has to go in flop, but I still think there's time for that to change, the same as Sterling. I think they could prove us wrong. They just need to get out there and perform under Maresca. I actually thought he was really good in the pre-season match just gone against Inter Milan, so fingers crossed he can keep that up, keep up the good performances, and make that transfer a little bit more worthwhile. I could argue I could put him in the still time section, but I think if we're being honest, just because of the fee paid, I'm going to have to say flop at this stage, but fingers crossed that can change in the future. Up next, though, we have a player from the opposite wing, Noni Madueke. This is someone that I think for the first time in this video can at least crack good signing. When he came in, I wasn't expecting the world of him from the Eredivisie, but he's done a good job on the right for Chelsea. Never really let us down too much. Obviously, the odd weird moment like when he tried to take that penalty, but we can forgive that. The guy is pretty good on that right-hand side when he cuts in on that left foot. Needs to add a bit more threat, I think, on his right, going to the byline and putting it in that way. If he can make himself a bit more of a two-way winger, he'll be even more dangerous. But I do like Madueke. Last season he was good under Poch, so for that reason he is a good signing. Up next though is Malo Gusto, and I think everyone will agree, top transfer. When we bought him in, I thought, yeah, I've heard of him a little bit through Football Manager and whatnot, but I didn't expect much of him. Reece James is one of the best right backs in the world, and he'd never overtake him. But obviously, Reece James with his injuries, it's proved that Malo Gusto was a good signing because he ended up playing so much football and didn't just play, actually almost made it like Reece James had never gone because he was getting so many good performances in that right back spot. And I actually think in world football, when they're both fit, Chelsea have the best right back options in the world. I'm not saying either one of them is the best, but the fact that we've got Gusto and Reece James, I don't think you'll see many other teams with that quality of right backs. So that's one of the few signings that BlueCo have made that I actually think is a top transfer. Up next though is Enzo Fernandez, and this one will be a divisive one. Some people will say flop because of the amount spent on him, some will say good signings, and I actually think based on last season I would be more inclined to say flop if it wasn't for the thing that came out that he had an injury basically the whole year. Whether that was just an excuse and it wasn't really affected him all that much, I don't know, but we know how good Enzo Fernandez is. He hasn't quite shown it at Chelsea yet, but there have been some special moments in that midfield that give me hope that he could be the man in the middle of a park to really take this team to the next level. This season, injury-free, fingers crossed he can play well and get back to the levels that we all expect, so I'm going to say still time, even if that's a little bit harsh on some of the players that are in the flop section. But Enzo for me goes exactly in this tier, and if there's anyone that disagrees, I want to hear your opinions in the comments, because I know that will be one of the most diversive ones of everything that I've talked about so far. Angelo is one that when we signed him, I wasn't expecting him to tear it up for the first team, but he was a wonder kid in FM, and I figured if Chelsea gave him the right development, either on loan or at the club, we would make a profit. And I would have said that if we hadn't then gone and signed about 9 right wingers in his place. I mean, Paez is coming in at some point, Estevao as well, another Brazilian right winger who's left-footed and cuts in on that left. And even though Angelo always looks good whenever he plays for Chelsea in pre-season, I don't ever think he's going to influence the first team. Will he make us a profit? I don't necessarily know. It'd be too harsh to call him a flop. So I'm going to just say still time on him, I suppose. He could make a profit, but it would depend how this season goes for him. He's still at the club right now. He needs to get on loan somewhere to keep developing because he's not going to play at Chelsea, I wouldn't have thought. Christopher Nkunku, this is an interesting one because I'm actually going to say good signing, which I know some people say is crazy because he's not played all that much for us, but he is one of those that when he has came into the team and has played minutes, looks like quality straight away. It doesn't look like he's going to take a while to get up to speed. He looks like he's got that star quality in the Chelsea team. He's a player that I think many teams would love to have operating as maybe a striker, as a number 10, available on the left or the right if we really need him as well. So this will be a big season for him if he can stay fit, but I think we'll all see the Nkunku we expected to see when Chelsea first signed him this year. But from everything I've seen for him, when he is fit for Chelsea, he is a good signing in my opinion. So far, BlueCo's signing started off badly and then got a little bit better as time went on by the looks of it. Nicholas Jackson is up next, and there is, for me, a guarantee that he is in one of these top 2 tiers. I think he could make a top transfer after this coming season, but for now, he is a good signing. I know people will clown on him for some of the chances missed, but what he offers up front, there's many teams out there that I think would love to have him. Yes, he isn't the most clinical finisher, but he creates so many chances off his own back. He can hold the ball up. He's a good dribbler. dribbler, he's physical, he can get in a defender's face, and I know that he's had some real notable misses so far for Chelsea, but I actually think he's done a good job. One of the better strikers that we've had in the last decade or so. Lots of them have struggled, but so far for me, Jackson has been a good signing. Be interesting to see how he does this year. If he can continue and try and hit 20 goals this season, I think he'll do a very good job if he can do that. But I like Jackson. He's someone that I can admire for his work rate and whatnot. So for me, he is in the good signing section. Axel Disasi, I believe, is next based on this very grainy image. And he is someone that when I was looking at this list previously, I haven't actually planned these out, but when I was looking at this, I was thinking, where on earth will I put him? Because I don't think he's a flop. I don't think he's a good signing, nor do I think he'll make his profit. So maybe a fault of the tier list I've created here in terms of the tiers that I've made. If there was a okay section, he'd go in there, but I think for now I'll just sit on the fence. I'll say still time on Disasi. He's a player that's done okay when called upon, had some glaring errors like the spectacular own goal that he scored in the Cup against Leicester, but at the same time, because of him and Tosin Adarabioyo coming in, Trevor Chalobah, who is also being sold for pure profit, but also because he's not really got a place in the team now, is being sold on. I actually think he's better than Disasi and Tosin, which isn't Disasi's fault, but maybe poor planning from the club side, so for that reason, I'll just stick him in still time, just so I can sit on the fence. Diego Moreira, this is one of those players, if you're not a Chelsea fan, you'll say who. We signed him, loaned him out, it hasn't really gone to plan so far for him, and the fact that we've got so many wingers ahead of him in the Chelsea ranks at the minute, whether they be on loan or at the club, I don't expect us to make our money back on this guy. So for that reason, I'm just going to call it what it is. He is a flop at the minute. Maybe things will change, but I don't really expect him to do anything too worthwhile in a Chelsea shirt. Leslie Ogochukwu just scored against Inter Milan, an equaliser in pre-season. I think this is one of those. Chelsea signed him for what was it, like £20 million or so? Spent a lot of time out injured, but when he is in the team, does a decent job. So like many of these younger players, he's in the still time section. This might look like I'm sitting on the fence a little bit with some of these guys, but at the same time, it's hard to judge these players that haven't really been given a chance just yet. Maybe these guys will go on loan, maybe they'll get some first team football this year, I don't know, but either way, it's a bit too harsh to judge them yet and say they're flops when they haven't really got to that point. Rob Sanchez, though, is someone I think we can put in the flop section. Chelsea signed him to be their starting goalkeeper from Brighton. The signal should have been there when he was already the third choice goalie at Brighton, but either way, came in, pulled off some good starts, but obviously isn't the goalkeeper that we want long term in terms of his ball playing ability. And now the fact that Chelsea have signed a new goalkeeper over him who looks to be the new number one, and Petrovic also played over him last season, it'll be hard to say that Sanchez is anything but a flop. Maybe not really his own fault, but the way that Chelsea have planned it, Sanchez is not going to make him the money back. He hasn't been a good signing, and for that reason, I think we're going to call him what he is, which is a flop. Next is Petrovic, who I actually think did a good job last season when called upon. Obviously isn't the man long term. I'm not going to say he's a good signing because of that. We've signed a new goalkeeper over him. But I think if Chelsea were to sell him, they'd get their money back or make a profit. He didn't do himself any harm last season in that net for Chelsea. Is he the man that was going to guide us to a Champions League and a Premier League one day? Obviously not. But as a goalkeeper in the Premier League, I think he could do a good job of it. Could play top 5 leagues of European football. So Petrovic goes in as a profit maker. Romeo Lavia came in last season for 50 million and then got injured and didn't really play at all for the whole season. This season will be a big year for him, but he is, of course, in still time. There hasn't really been any opportunity to gauge how good he'll be for Chelsea. Looked good in pre-season so far for us, though, so for that reason, I've got big hopes for him this year, but he goes in that still time section, as does Moises Caicedo. Struggled a bit when he came to Chelsea, but particularly in that second half of last season, got much better and was one of our best players, but again, a big fee. There's big question marks about whether he can play alongside Enzo Fernandez, how he'll fit into Maresca's system. Who knows, but I think Caicedo for now, we can say it's still time on that. David Washington is next, a striker that looks like he had a bit of promise, but Chelsea spent a big fee on him, only to then sign loads of players on top of him. I mean, this season alone, Sammy Memora Dion's came in, he'll be above Washington in the pecking order. Mark Guiers came in as well in pre-season, and in pre-season, he's pushed himself ahead of David Washington as well. So for that reason, I'm going to have to say flop, because I don't think he'll make the money back. I would say still time, but I just don't ever see him even getting a crack in a Chelsea shirt at all. So for that reason, I will say flop. This one is about as easy as it comes though. Cole Palmer, top transfer for sure. The guys came in, has been one of the best players in the Premier League, so fits straight in to that section. Omari Kellyman, this is now getting into this season's transfers for Chelsea. I don't know anything about the guy. Came in from Aston Villa. I know he's good in Football Manager, but again, that's as far as my knowledge extends to. So I'm just going to have to say still time for him. And the same for Caleb Boehly also recently signed from the MLS. I've got 2 pictures of him here. I don't know why. We'll just take the one out, the smallest one, to take up less room in the still time section, which is exactly where he goes. He's been loaned out for the season, I believe, to develop a little bit and hopefully come back and be an option at left back for Chelsea in the future. Tosin Adebayo, it's getting a bit easier now with these new coming signings because it's a bit hard to judge him just yet, but I think he's one that's still time. Be interesting to see if he can take that step up from Fulham to Chelsea, but fingers crossed he can. Renato Viega is a player that I would say still time, but from everything I've seen so far, good signing, or at least profit maker at the very least. Let's keep him there for now, just because he's came in this pre-season for a pretty small fee, looked very assured at left back, and looks like he will be part of the first team squad going forward. So yeah, again, another one that looked good against Inter Milan in the most recent pre-season friendly, and I think there's no way Chelsea could now sell him for less money than they signed him for. I think we'll see big things from him. I think he'll be one of the surprise packages in this Chelsea team this season. So I'm going out on a limb. I'm not going to say still time. I'm already going to say he will make Chelsea at least a profit in the future, but I think come the end of the season, he'll be in one of these 2 sections, almost guaranteed. I think he's got a lot of potential in him, looks like a good player, physically imposing, so he slots in right there. Aaron Anselmino, signed from Boca Juniors, loaned back to Boca, no clue about the guy, so still time for him also. This just shows you the craziness of some of Chelsea's transfers here. And now we're down to 3 players. We've got Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, another player coming from Leicester. This is one, still time, can't really judge him yet, but under Maresca's system, he already knows it. Fingers crossed he can get straight into the team and start getting them to play that way. Whether he'll be part of the team by the end of the season, I'm not sure, but I think we'll see him at the early stages, definitely, as he tries to influence the players in terms of the style of play. He already knows Maresca's style, so that can only be a benefit to him, and he's probably going to take up what minutes Conor Gallagher would have had he stayed at the club. Mark Guéhi is another one like Renato Vega. I've seen enough of him already, just because of the price we paid. This guy is a profit maker, and I could even say good signing. I love the kid from what I've seen in pre-season. He looks really good, really talented up front, a workhorse as well. He's someone that the fans are going to love, I'm sure, if he keeps playing for us. But just because we have signed Samuel Moradion, I think Guéhi will fall down the pecking order a little bit, might be loaned out, I'm not sure. But for the fee from Barcelona, cannot complain about him. At the very least, we'll make a profit on him one day, but I expect at some point he'll be in one of these 2 sections if he keeps it up. And finally, Philip Jorgensen, still time on him. Is he going to be the man to answer all of Chelsea's problems in the net? Based on our history since Cech and Courtois, probably not, but you never know. Maybe he'll be the one that saves us another 30 or 40 million on goalkeepers that we'll inevitably spend, because that's what we seem to be doing at the minute. I do wonder if all of this is some kind of plan for Chelsea to then not really buy anyone in the coming seasons, because they've got so many players lined up and coming through the ranks. I can't tell you. I don't know what's going through their minds. So many transfers coming in. A lot of them that I'd be happy with on an individual basis, but when there's so many of them, you have to think, what on earth is going on? What are we going to do with all these players? And that now completes my tier list of all the signings under Todd Boehly's Chelsea so far. Plenty to go into there. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments, but we're done. Like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.